Of applause for Adrian for doing all the media work. He's awesome. We good? Okay. Well, like I said, my name is Trenton Ivey, and my talk is checklist pen testing, not checklist hacking. For those of you who don't know me, I'm quite a few things. If my PowerPoint will work, I'm a dad. This is my kid. I'm a network pen tester for a Fortune 500 company. I'm currently the chapter leader for OWASP Milwaukee, and we're trying to start MilSec. I know Andre is around here somewhere. If you were tired of seeing the, if you're tired of seeing the website say 2012 is the next event, that's going to be changing soon. So you can sign up for that. Shameless plug. And finally, I'm a volunteer for Hackers for Charity. So come stop by the booth, say hi, buy stuff. So with that, I've gotten in this idea of we need to checklist all the things, right? And when I tell people in the security community this is usually the response I get. Because I think we have this, I don't want to say, fear is maybe not the best word, but we have this aversion to checklists. We hear the words checkbox pen testing, and what do we think, right? The first thing that we think of is kind of boo, not enough. We have a lot of companies out there, a lot of people that we're trusting in for security that have this mentality of, if we can make the auditor happy by checking the box, then our security problems go away. And I think that's something that we need to get away from. But what I have observed within the security community is that we have this checkbox mentality and we say boo. And because of that, we've become afraid of checklists. So today I'm going to talk about some of the things that checklists can do and why they're a good idea. So the first thing I'm going to do is show how checklists have saved lives and money. Next, I'm going to talk about the elements of a good checklist if you decide to make your own for your own teams. I'm going to demo some tools because it wouldn't be a hacker talk if there weren't some cool tools and Metasploit plugins. I'm going to talk about some of the plans that I have for this project going forward, and finally I'm going to try to answer any questions that you may have. I will give credit where it's due. I stole a lot of my material from Checklist Manifesto from Atul Gawande. If you haven't read this book and you're interested in the idea of checklisting things, I highly recommend this. It's a great read. The first example that I think is helpful is looking at pilots. Do I have any pilots in the room? You've got one hand, a couple hands in the back, right? If you've flown a plane, I'm told, I'm not a pilot, but I'm told that checklists are incredibly important. How many people flew to Bsides or ThoughtCon? Anybody? We got some hands? Right, so you essentially trusted your life in the pilot, but also in the checklist that they used. The first thing that they're going to do before they take off is run through a pre-flight checklist. During the flight, if anything goes wrong, they have thousands of checklists ready to pull up and say, this is what I need to do. If something goes wrong, you don't want to be panicked trying to think about what the next step is. You want to use a checklist that somebody has thought about beforehand. So from the takeoff to landing, you trusted in a checklist. Now, I think it's important to point out, if you were to give me a pilot's checklist, I don't think any of you would trust me to fly a commercial jet. Right? So there's a difference between a checklist and having one and being able to know how to use it efficiently. One of my next examples is the medical field. I think this is excellent. Doctors are great with stats. They love keeping numbers, which makes it fun for me to go back and review some of the data. But there's a story. There was a doctor from Johns Hopkins who worked on fixing central lines. They did a study where they decided to make a checklist of 5 items. They had hundreds of items that they could tackle, but they decided to make one checklist to tackle one issue. The checklist was the doctors needed to, before putting in a central line, wash hands with soap, clean patient's skin with antiseptic, put drapes on the patient, sterile drapes, wear a mask, hat, sterile gloves, and then finally put a sterile dressing over the insertion site. So 5 things. Right, the doctors just have to go check, 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 check as part of this normal procedure. Well, they watched the results for a year. They actually told the nurses, if you see a doctor not do this, stop them and make them do this. We want to have 100% use of this checklist. And at the end of that time, they looked at the numbers and they had found that the 10-day line infection went from 11% down to 0. So if you think about everybody in this room, right, like this whole first 5 rows for the lower section and maybe that section over there, all would have gotten infected before this change. But 5 checks made the difference between infection and not infection. So they decided, this is cool, let's do the study a little bit longer. They went on for 2 more years to do this study, and they found that in the entire time of the study, they had prevented, they think, 43 infections. They calculated from looking at previous years, they had saved 8 lives from a 5-point checklist. And this is the cool one. One hospital with a 5-point checklist saved $2 million. It's a lot of money for a hospital to save by just making doctors check off 5 boxes. And so I think that when you have complex tasks like flying a plane or being a doctor, checklists are really important. But I think it's also important to consider the type of checklist that we use. My team that I work with as a pen tester have been building out checklists for the last year. I'm going to share kind of what we've been using. I've made them a little bit more general. But I think it's important to know how to use checklists. And so we've kind of using this book as a reference and kind of doing some of our own experimenting. We found that it's important to first define the type of checklist that you need for the situation. There are two types. The first is read, do. So this is where you take the checklist, you read through the list, and you do it as you read through the list. This is really important when the order of steps is incredibly critical. Finally is do confirm, right? This is what we use a lot of for pen testing. We need to make sure that we do this so that by the end of the engagement, we didn't miss anything stupid. Once you've picked the type of a checklist that's important, this is we found is incredibly critical. Identify the pause point. If you have a checklist and there's not a good reason to use it, or not a good time where you stop and have to say, this is where I need to use the checklist, nobody will ever use it. If you don't have a pause point that says, use this checklist then, and it's not natural as a part of your workflow, it'll get ignored. People will hate the checklist. This is my favorite. Keep the list short, 5 to 9 items. So in the example that I gave with the hospitals, 5 items. We've tried to keep our checklists for different parts of our engagement no more than 9 items, and it's helped. And then finally, focus on the critical points. When we first developed out our checklist, it was like 100 items long, so it broke the keep the list short rule. But the other disadvantage was we had a lot of stuff that didn't actually matter, and so we decided, well, what are the most critical steps? What is the one thing that if we forget to do this in the engagement, the entire thing is messed up? And so when you build checklists, focus on critical points. I think when you build checklists, it's important to keep the language simple. How many people are QSAs, PA QSAs in the room? Anybody? Seeing a couple of hands. Right, I think that the DSS is a good standard, but one of the challenges with working with it is it's definitely not simple, at least in my opinion. Maybe there's some PCI gurus out there. But simple checklists are much more usable. Precise is very important. You have a lot of checklists that can have really ambiguous or unclear, I guess, lists. And so having it very precise and knowing exactly what you need to do as a part of checking off that box is important. Listening to be actionable. So when you read it, you need to be able to know what you need to do and how to do it. So you shouldn't have, if you can't make it an action, then you need to change the list. And then finally, adoptable. We found that as our workflow or transition or testing methodologies change, we want the checklist to be able to adapt with that. And then this is the most important. You need to fill test and then revise checklists. We went through about a year of changing our checklist. In fact, we went and sat down for about 2 days to revise our checklist again, just because if you don't constantly test and revise, it won't work. As a side note to that, if you decide to build a checklist for your team, don't give up if it sucks the first 10 or 15 times, right? Keep at it. It's actually very, very helpful if you can go forward. So there's a lot more, but that's kind of a basic list. I'm going to demo some tools because it's fun. I like building tools. These are all open source and available on GitHub. Actually, one of the tools that I'm going to demo is in a pull request for Rapid7's Metasploit right now. So hopefully MSF Update will get this to you all soon. But if not, you can get it from GitHub on one of my profiles. So 2 tools. First is DokuWiki, or DokuWiki, plus some customization. And we built out a note framework out of this that makes it easy to take notes. You don't have to use something like this, obviously, but this is just something that can give you an idea of what you could do. And then finally, I have a Metasploit plus a custom wiki plugin, which we've defined as maximum awesomeness. Oh no, my image didn't work. Dang. Oh well. So let's see if I can make this work without major fail. Uh-oh. I'm not sure if that was supposed to happen. Oh, there we go. We're good. Sorry as I readjust the mic so everybody can hear me as I type. Thank you. So when we build out this framework, one of the cool things about DokuWiki is that you can actually put it into it's a web app that doesn't require a backend database. So everything is flat file. So the cool thing with this is that we can wrap our engagements in a TrueCrypt volume. So when we're done with an engagement, we have a TrueCrypt volume that contains all of our notes, all of our finished checklists for an engagement. We can unmount that TrueCrypt volume, and then throw it on a hard drive. And it's completely safe. It's got documentation. If somebody comes back to us 6 months later and says, hey, between the hours of 1 and 1:05 p.m. on this day, did you do this? We can pull that TrueCrypt volume back, look at it, and it's easy to have that record in a nice, concise way. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a TrueCrypt volume. Can everybody see the text okay? I tried to maximize it. We good? Good? All right. Uh-oh. Want. All right. That's better. So I'm just going to go ahead and make it, let's see, I'll make it 100 megs. Usually make it a little bit bigger, but there's not going to be much here. I'm going to keep with default settings all the way until the file type, in which I'm going to use Linux ext4. If you wonder why I'm doing this, it's because I can't see my own monitor, so I'm trying to look at the screen as I go. I think that's 4. This is a fun part. I get to type a bunch of random characters. Ah, 88 more to go. All right, so now that it's gonna create a TrueCrypt volume. For those of you who aren't familiar with TrueCrypt, it essentially creates a disk space that while it's mounted, I can access everything in it. While it's unmounted, it should be pretty strong, unbreakable. They say unbreakable, right? It hasn't been proven to be broken yet. Storage for crypto. So 1 second. Okay, we're good. So now I have a TrueCrypt volume. I'm going to go ahead and mount it to my web root for my local system. Kali has an Apache server built in, so if you have a Kali distro, you can do this right from there. Okay, so now I'm in the web root. This is the encrypted TrueCrypt volume that I've set up. Here's where the stuff that I put in with DocuWiki comes into play. If I can find my mouse. I'm told that I shouldn't use Linux for demonstrations. I should get a Mac or Windows, but I can't quite give up Ubuntu. There we go. Okay, sorry. So I've created a repo or an org on GitHub called SecurityKB to kind of be the starting grounds for this project. If you're interested, feel free to play with it. Send me pull requests. I'm happy to update it. But it's as simple as copying the URL in the bottom right-hand corner once you've viewed the page. And we can go back to our mounted TrueCrypt volume. And we're going to go ahead and clone the project into our TrueCrypt volume. And we'll see if it works over the Wi-Fi here. I should have had some jokes to tell while this was going on. The Wi-Fi's. I could close. Okay, this is taking forever. I'm going to backup plan. Ah, terrible. Okay, we'll go back to the original way. Sorry. While this is running, somebody give me a trivia question. And then I will ask somebody else to answer it for another prize. No? When was the last time the Brewers won the World Series? Somebody from Milwaukee. Is that correct? It
sounds about right.
Sounds about right. Okay, good job. I'm reaching here. Dang it, only 15%. Okay, well, while this is going, I'm going to switch to the next part of my demo. So I've got a Metasploit plugin, which this will make sense once the wiki is set up. It's as simple as just downloading the plugin, throwing it in your plugin directory, and then doing load wiki. Once the plugin's set up, you're able to do help wiki. And you can see a couple commands that I've added. The first is DokuWiki, which outputs all the Metasploit data in a DokuWiki-friendly format. The second is MediaWiki, same thing, but with MediaWiki. So if you decide to use a different framework than we do, the same idea will work. If you're familiar with the console commands in Metasploit, you can run DokuWiki followed by any of the normal output commands. And you'll get a wiki-formatted version of text to just throw right into your wiki. So as we're performing pen tests, we can do all of our work in Metasploit, but then we can take notes by just simply copying and pasting host files, creds, things like that, straight from Metasploit into our framework. I forgot that I developed it and I have the source code on my laptop. Don't have to pull it from GitHub. Okay, thank God. We're good. Okay, so one more thing. Since I didn't. All right, so I had to change the ownership of the file so that my web server could see it. So once we're here, we've got a setup page that's ready for us to go. It's got all the framework for engagement. There is an installer script that you can run, which I'm not going to demo because I'm short on time because of screwing up the GitHub thing. But once you're here, you can log in. And from this point, you have a framework for your entire engagement. So we've split it out into a couple of different formats. We have, on the left here, you can see that there's a notes section and then a task section. The notes section is where we document everything that we do. So from the pre-engagement, we have a set of questions, right? So if you do a pre-engagement call or some other type of pre-engagement work, you can actually document everything that you find before you even begin. We can upload files, so if we have some type of contract or statement of work, we can throw it right in the wiki so that's archived as well. We have a spot for network-wide actions. So sometimes actions that you take against the target is not, you don't want to fill out every single host. Like an in-map scan, you're going to have hundreds of hosts. So this is a good place to document. We did an in-map scan against this entire range. And then we have a targets note page. This is kind of the heart of the project. As you're working through an engagement, you can begin to fill out which hosts you're looking at, what you found, accounts that you've compromised, and then data that you've compromised. The cool thing about this is that if you follow the framework throughout your entire engagement, it makes reporting much, much better at the end. One of the worst things for a pen tester is to have to write the report, but this has significantly helped the reporting process because I have screenshots, documents of everything that I've captured, where I've captured it, when I've captured it, how I've captured it, all accessible from one spot. So we can add host pages from here. We also have our task lists. This is where we have those checklists, right? So this is not quite the one that we've used, but it's very similar. So first thing, pre-engagement. Confirm the TrueCrypt volume password is stored in a team key store. If you have this really long password to secure the wiki, the last thing you want to do is lose it. That's a critical step. And so we go on to completing the engagement information, which is where we say, if something goes wrong in the engagement, I can have one button to click and see who I'm supposed to call, which comes in handy if a server tips over. I'm not going to go through the entire list, but you can download it and take a look at the rest of them. We have similar things for target development, information gathering, and exploit tasks. So I've titled the talk Checklist Pentesting, not Checklist Hacking, because the last thing that I want somebody to do is to try to build out a checklist that is the sum of hacking, right? Just like I can't fly an airplane with a pilot's checklist, nobody should be able to be considered a pen tester with a pen tester's checklist. We've actually used the offensive security mentality of try harder as a checklist. The very last thing that we do in an engagement is sit down and say, okay, what have you done to actually try harder? After you've gone through everything else, what steps did you do to go above and beyond just the automated? There's a nice getting started page that has all more information if you're interested in checking this out. Now that this is loaded, I want to demo the wiki plugin really quick, and then I'll move to questions. So I'm going to go ahead and create a host page. And actually, I'm going to do services for a page. And like the other plugins, you can actually limit it by address. So from here, I'm going to go back to the framework and actually create a new host page. Normally I had more notes, but I'm just trying to do this to get started. The template actually includes a lot of page templates to make adding the hosts easier. But when you're done, you get a nicely formatted table of all your Metasploit output. We've actually built other plugins, and if anybody's interested, you can come and talk to me at the HFC booth to automate all of our testing so that by the time we're done with our pre-engagement scans, we have a wiki that has a host page for everything that's actually in scope. So we can automate a lot of this to make testing significantly easier. So a couple things I'd like to do next. Obviously, this field test and improve we found to be very important. I'd like to get the community involved with it. Right now, this checklist is built towards network pen testing, but I know we've got app pen testers. I know we've got sysadmins that have to build servers out. Checklists are great for those too. So I'd like to see us as a community work towards building out better checklists collaboratively. I'd like to build a knowledge base as well. I started securitykb.com. It will be online soon. My thought is that I'd like to have cheat sheets, essentially. We have the RTFM manual. It's awesome. You can check it out at the HFC booth. I'd like to build a lot of this into the framework so that as you're testing, you have everything that you need right at your fingertips, or at least a good start. I think we need a network top 10. And I'd like to use this as kind of a way to make the checklist of things that need to be tested as part of that top 10. And then finally, I would like to develop more automation for this. I'd like to see the framework build out so that we can use different tools and more tools to automate documentation quicker so that the checklist is easier to use so that testing and reporting become much more simpler. So that's all I've got. Thank you for putting up with the massive demo fail. I apologize. Are there any questions? Questions? I can tempt people with a beer cozy if anybody's got one. No? Okay. Well, if anybody does, I will be up at the HFC booth. Come stop by and say hi. Thank you.